Welcome back to another edition of the Kaufman Corner podcast. With you, as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. We're going to dig into the Royals offseason. For one, Dan Szymborski wrote a nice piece on FanGraphs as the Royals outfield is a missed opportunity. We're going to take the opportunity to, one, dive into some of the things that he said. Also, are there any free agents left out there? Is there opportunities still knocking for the Kansas City Royals? And then we'll also take the opportunity to look back at some of the guys we discussed. Where have they landed and for how much was their opportunity missed with any of the individuals that we've talked about right here on the Kaufman Corner podcast? We're doing that right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
This is the Kaufman Corner Podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
All right, thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Off and running, Rany, and there's a nice piece written. We're both big fans of the FanGraphs. Dan Szymborski has written an interesting article. I've got some bones to pick with it. I'm not gonna shy away from it. But he says that the Royals outfield is a missed opportunity. Your thoughts overall about the piece.
I mean, we can certainly nitpick some of the points that he makes within the piece, but man, as a headline, like, I don't know if you could distill all the thoughts in my brain this offseason over what the Royals have done with their outfield than to say Kansas City's outfield is a missed opportunity. Because you and I all winter long have been saying the outfield is an opportunity, and they keep missing. So maybe we can debate. They did bring in Jonathan India, and I think that on some level that is going to address the outfield, even if it's indirect. But he makes some statements you can argue with, but some of the facts he presents in this piece are very compelling.
There are some interesting. I'll call them compelling. I'll give you compelling. They are compelling facts. They compel me to dig in and do research. So yeah, I think that's accurate. The thing I would say is, missed opportunity. I'm going to, if not him, then who is a phrase that I use a lot. Like, okay, I don't like this guy. Okay, then who? So then you got to go out and find the then who. And I think oftentimes pieces like this, that's what they're missing, is the then who, right? It's like, well, they're bad here. Okay. And it's a missed opportunity. Right. With who? And the only name that's mentioned is Anthony Santander, right? Like, that's the only name that's mentioned is Anthony Santander. And we can go by, how do you want to do it? I've got a number of different pieces where I've pulled quotes that I think are interesting. What do you want to do? You want to run through that and we'll see what we don't get to on your list, or do you want to go with your list and we'll see what we don't get to on mine?
No, go ahead and start with your list because you have the bones to pick, and then we can.
All right, I do. This was actually Rany's topic, and I'm somewhat pirating it because he got me going, and so I was like, okay, let's take a look here. I'll quote: "Fortune usually frowns upon a 100-loss team that makes a bunch of low-key free agent signings." He's talking about the 2024 Royals here, right? This is very early in the piece. Fortune usually frowns upon a 100-loss team that makes a bunch of low-key free agent signings. That was not the case for the Royals. The veteran starters they added, Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, and then it continues. Low-key free agent signings. Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha are then named, right? So they are in the list of low-key free agent signings. By total dollars spent, they were the 8th and 11th most expensive free agent starting pitchers on the market. So what is not low key? If the 8th and 11th, there are 30 major league teams, all of whom usually every year need pitching. And market 29 in baseball signed the 8th and 11th most expensive starting pitchers. Where is then I guess only about 3 guys aren't low key. Is that it? If you're not signing the biggest name out there, it's a low key signing. Like I bristle at that. I mean, I think that is a mindset of the Royals always do it wrong. The Royals are always cheap. And so there's the mindset. So then anything that they do is still low key, cheap. And then we work from there, because that's my preconceived notion, where if you stack it up, how much more were they supposed to have spent, and who were they supposed to have spent on? Like, I think just the tone and tenor of it right there irks me. Okay. From the standpoint that, like, those are two of, and then if you forget about results. I'm not even talking about the results, which were out of this world, right? Where they exceeded guys that got more money than them. But just on the spending of dollars, I don't understand how that's low key. Can your job is now to defend Dan Szymborski at every turn, Rany. Defend this statement.
I was about to say, I'm not Dan Szymborski, despite the fact that our last names both look like somebody spilled a Scrabble board. We are not related. So I would, be happy to have him defend himself if he were here today. He is not. But I will say this, like, first off, I think this is a bit of a semantic point, because I don't think whether or not these free agents were low key or not is not the point of the piece. If anything, I think what he's almost trying to say is that they're low key in the sense of the industry and, frankly, even analysts underestimated the importance of them. Like, they looked like low key at the time. They looked like they weren't going to have the impact that they did. But the bigger point I would make is, if your argument is that these were actually big free agent signings, I think that actually strengthens his point, which is that the Royals spending money, making a splash in the free agent market,
fair,
is the reason why they went to the playoffs last year when nobody expected them to do that. So, if anything, I feel like he's saying spending money last year did work. Now the Royals are in a position, unlike last year, where it seemed like they needed a miracle to make the playoffs. Now they're in a position where they're right on. Like, one of the points he'll make in this column is that, based on projections, the Royals are in that absolute sweet spot of when you want to spend free agent money, which is, you don't project to be in the playoffs right now, but you're just underneath the playoff verge. I think their playoff odds right now are something like 30%. And so any free agent you add to a team that's a 30% chance to make the playoffs is going to move the needle dramatically. And so, if anything, if he's saying that these were actually big signings, I think emphasizes what he's saying.
But he's not saying they're big signings. I want to be clear.
I would quibble with his
low
choice
key
of the word. I would quibble with his choice of the word, just like you are. They were not low key
free agent signings.
They may have been underestimated, but they were not low budget. They were not low money free agent signings.
And again, Dan is not here to defend himself. I will tell you, he will get an opportunity somewhere, either on this podcast or my radio show, because hands will reach out to him. But I just want to. So for me, my frustration is, like, this is the thing about the Royals. They suck. And then in 14 and 15, they're good. They're lucky. Right? Like, there's never credit for them, because they're always the case of what not to do. And so when they do something, instead of looking for and saying, here are all the things that they did that are right, here's what people should learn from them, they're lucky. Right? And that's what this is too. Some low-key free agents, look under my ass. It's a golden egg. How did that happen? Wow. And I don't like that. That irritates me, because I know that they targeted Lugo for 2 years. Right? We know that they worked hard on Michael Wacha. I just don't think that's fair. All right, you want me to keep firing, or
keep going?
All right. They made some smart deadline moves to bolster their bullpen, and they benefited from some pleasant surprises along the way. Look, another golden egg right under my ass. It's right there. I can't believe it. Again, not an astute move at the deadline, a pleasant surprise. Nobody did anything that was great. Look at these surprises.
He said they made some smart deadline moves. Like, what more do you want him to say? I think
they benefited from some pleasant surprises along the way. Why aren't they just smart moves?
Every team benefits from pleasant. Every playoff team, every team that certainly jumped.
Why doesn't he say that? And like every playoff team, they benefited from some
All
pleasant surprises along the way.
I will have a sternly worded letter to his editor. Like this
Okay.
is this is just wording choices. Like to me, the pleasant surprise. If you were to ask him what's a pleasant surprise, I think he would say being in the same division as the losingest team in the history of baseball. When you make the playoffs by one game, that probably made a difference. Again,
Sure.
That's okay. You expect, the whole point of the roster construction for 2024 was if we get some pleasant surprises along the way, we can make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Boom, they hit it.
Or it's the yin and yang of things. Sometimes things smile on you. Sometimes they go bad. Usually It's health or it's schedule driven. And the White Sox were not only as bad as we thought, they were probably worse. And when those things happen, you have to be able to capitalize on the opportunity, which at the deadline, the Kansas City Royals did, which going into the season, viewing that even while buried with well over 100 losses, they saw the opportunity and they spent money. But again, what they did do is poo-pooed away. That's why I said this starts the tenor of what I think is not giving credit. Like basically this piece is largely about explaining why people weren't wrong saying the Royals were going to suck again last year when they ended up not only being in the playoffs, but moving forward. All right, so here's the next one. Witt carried more than his fair share of the overall load, meaning offense, with his 10.4 WAR, accounting for more than half of the total 20 WAR Kansas City got from its position players. Okay? I mean, isn't that recognizing the value of a player, though? Said with Witt's season and a bare level of competence from these three positions, he's talking about the corner, outfield, first base, and DH, which he pointed out was very low as far as what you could expect that they got, if they could have even gotten one WAR out of those spots, which they didn't, how much better they would have been. Kansas City's offense should have been one of the top 3 or 4 in the American League. You talked about how it was a respectable 6th. Again, they were trashed the year before, and they get to 6th, and instead of being like, look at the gap that they made, largely from, one, the astute signing of Bobby Witt Jr., and I don't expect him to write a column every year about how great the signing was, how perfect the timing was, that you waited till he proved himself, but still got him to where he's a bargain. But to me, the story here is now saying, well, yeah, they did all this, but they still should have done this, this, and this. To which, again, I would say, who was the first baseman they missed on? Who was the DH? Who was the outfielder that they missed on? That's the part that it's just like, look, I mean, they got, like, I think it's also not pointing out where they were in 2023, that those are all improvements just to be zeros at those positions, right? It's not giving credit to the fact that they were even worse the year before. So, like, I get it, but 0 is not the bottom. 0 is in WAR is just above average, right? Like, that's all it is. But teams have, and this team was below that. So they have achieved to getting to a 0, but 0 makes it sound like if you don't even field a team, you would have exactly what they had out there in right field. That's not the case, right? I think it's oversimplifying it. Again, it's keeping with the theme of not crediting how much the Royals really did, right? The Royals did very little this offseason to address these deficiencies. Their trade for Jonathan India was a good idea, but it's insufficient on its own. Okay, it's insufficient on its own. So I don't know. So should they give him back? Is that what is the point here? Like, if you can't get all the way to being the best team in baseball, don't even try. Is that what is the point of that sentence?
Well, I think that the point of not just the sentence, but the whole article underlying what he's writing about is actually a sense that he's actually giving the Royals credit for being good enough, not just in 2024, but projecting to be good enough in 2025 that these decisions matter. Like, he wouldn't be writing this article if the Royals had gone 70-92 last year. He wouldn't be writing this article if they went to the playoffs, but everybody was convinced it was a stone cold fluke and it really doesn't matter what they do with their corner outfield because they're just not good enough to contend.
Okay, I grant you that. But what do you think of that sentence? I want you to look at just that sentence.
Well, I think what he's saying is, like, the point he made. One of the things that I took from this is I knew their corner outfield.
We can move forward to that. I want you to address just this part.
This part is about India. Is that yes, it was a good idea, but the Royals have 3. What he's pointing out is not just 2, 3 huge lineup holes last year. India fills 1, but the fact that they've only filled 1 is a real problem because
It's what,
you have
33% of the way to getting the job done?
Yes, but it's February. Like you should be at least 66%. Like, you want to fake one position or hope on one. His point is that based on every projection they've got, the Royals are likely to have at least two big holes in their lineup. And they were able to overcome it last year because Bobby Witt had not just, a great Bobby Witt season. He had what may end up being the greatest season of his career because it's going to be one of the greatest seasons of anyone's career. And that they were able to overcome it. But like if Bobby Witt is just an MVP, a regular MVP candidate this year, that might not be enough to paper over that many lineup holes. I think he's saying basically this team is so good that they could be a playoff team if they would just fill one more hole in their
right. But I think he's saying two more holes minimum because later on he's going to get to about how they didn't, well, I'll get to it here in a second. But listen, I'm going to utter the name that you really bristled at when I brought it up before we started here, but this is Joe Sheehan-esque in the idea that, like, if you don't do it all, you're just cheap, right? Like, this to me is not acknowledging, if not him, then who, right? Like, okay, so they got India, but India by itself doesn't solve it all. Okay, but like, that's like, so if you are only able to accomplish part of what would make you the ideal franchise, then you shouldn't even have tried. Like, I don't understand what the alternative is to just get more players, no matter what the cost is. And we're going to get to some of the names of the guys that we've discussed. Forget about, like, I will come back to then, why is everybody not jumping on the ass of the New York Yankees? They have unlimited resources and they let Juan Soto walk across the street. Like,
look,
to me,
I know a lot of people who are jumping on their ass. I mean, there are people who are criticizing the Yankees for not spending. Like, I agree.
They should be the only thing written right now. It should, like, seriously. Like, from everybody, if this, because anytime the Royals do the analysis of the small market teams until they've had multiple years of success, and so hopefully we get to that where it's like, well, the Rays just no pitching, and the Rays, until you've done it again and again, until they back up last year with more success, then they're still just the team that got lucky, and it's always going to be written from the perspective of they need to do more, they're just cheap. Right? Because generally speaking, most people in baseball media come from big markets and they write everything from a big market point of view. Like, that's reality. And so that's why these pieces drive me crazy, because it's not recognizing and understanding the economics of baseball. And it's why when it was said, you and I talked about it, I know we talked about it on my radio show, it was one of the great statements in the history of small market baseball when Hank Steinbrenner says you can't keep up with Dodger spending. Like, that is, it's fantastic. Like, it's so much more than even the evil empire being uttered by the Boston Red Sox.
You know who would not have made that statement?
George
Steinbrenner. Exactly.
He would have spent more.
Exactly.
And it's the difference between a guy who's like, screw you, I'll build more ships, buy me another player, and a guy who's like, I don't know how to make money. All I do is cut the bottom line here on Yankeeville because that's all I've got. And that's all I know. Because let me get this silver spoon out of my mouth and the gold one out of my ass, and I'll see if I can carve something out of the bottom line somewhere to try to make the profit margin better. But I don't really know how to go out and make money anywhere else. George Steinbrenner was a self-made man who had owned ABA franchises. And listen, he was an insufferable pain in the ass in numerous ways, but damn it, the man could go out and make money, and he wasn't going to be outspent by anyone. And he knew he had the most resources, and he was always willing to spend them and then go figure out what it took to spend more. And that's the Dodgers right now. And the Yankees are just pencil pushers, right? That's the reality of it. Yes, I love it. And it means that real economic change may be coming to baseball if the big bad Yankees are going to sit and cry poverty. It's great. Let me continue here though. Right? The India thing irks me because it's a really good signing. And I was like, that's great. Would have been great if they could have gotten two more, but at least they got this, right? But no, instead it's like their trade for India was a good idea. Not even calling it a good trade. It's just a good idea, but it's insufficient on its own. I object to that. In the interest of fairness, I should mention that the Royals did make a 3-year offer to Anthony Santander, but is that the final offer you make for the type of player you absolutely need to have on your team? So, okay, I just want to be clear. If that's the last player, then every team that's out there who's one player away, who doesn't immediately top whatever offer is on the board, is a fool. which in itself, I think you, as a man who's at least minimally mathematically inclined, can see that if there's more than one team in that situation, you get an exponential increase in amount for a player that there is an end. There is a limit to what any player is worth, as long as you have a limit to how much money you can spend. And so that's 5 for 92 for Santander. Do you think the last 2 or 3 years of that is going to be a good deal? Do you think that the Royals could handle the last 2 or 3 years of that if he's a nothing player?
Again, I am not Dan Szymborski.
But I know, but I'm asking.
I know, and I do not
agree with me that is.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like this, when he says, "Is that the final offer you make?" For the type of player you absolutely need. Well, I mean, I don't think there's any player the word absolutely is doing a lot of work there. There are other options. Is a 3-year offer? Would you offer 3 years to Anthony Santander? Yeah, probably. But I'm glad the Royals didn't go. But I wouldn't go beyond 3 because I don't think he's a great player. Like I certainly don't think in 3 years he might not be playable after the 3rd year. So that is not one of the contracts that I'm upset about. In fact, as we learned, the 5-year $92.5 million for the Blue Jays is actually probably it's be counted as less than that because so much of it is deferred. Like
right.
Like half of it or more is being deferred because he's not worth that much money. And the Royals made a competitive offer. Like that's the kind of offer that they recognize that he does fill a need, that he's more valuable to them than other teams, but they have a limit. I'm fine with that.
And let me point out, the Royals were also part of their offer also was deferred money. Correct. And so they are going down that road in an effort of saying, okay, we don't really have the budget, but if you'll defer, we'll give you that money. So they are not, which scares the crap out of me, I'll be honest with you, that they're going to start going down that road, that there won't be one day the market correction that they have to go through, because I'm hoping they're going to build this system up and build this organization up to where there's never more than 1 year that this team isn't in contention because they've got more players coming. But if you start burying yourself with a lot of money for players that aren't playing anymore, an organization like this is going to have a hard time overcoming it. But from the standpoint of this, like, are the Royals trying? Yes. They were not only in on it, they were in on a much more responsible 3-year deal in the $60 to $66 million range with deferred money, which meant that they were trying to even overextend to try to be better right now. So I think that's an important part. By the way, we'll continue with this here in 1 second, but we're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, Randy, my final nugget here, and that's this one. He finishes with the firework finale at the end. Dan Szymborski from FanGraphs we're talking about here. Not spending more to make the 25 Royals a winning hand imperils the $170 million they've already invested in the team. Every team with a young uber star should look at the Angels and their time with peak Mike Trout as a cautionary tale, not a template. A phenom ought to be a reason to make your team better, not a reason to make your team just good enough to have a chance to maybe sneak into the playoffs. Is quite possibly, I don't know, I'm going to stop short of saying dumb, because the Angels, I don't know if he paid attention to what the Angels have done, but all they've done is stack more money, just piss poorly spent. Grossly overspending on an often injured third baseman. Like, they did exactly what he's asking for, and they flopped. They did nothing like what the Royals are doing. They did not go get pitching. That's not what they did. And the Royals did. They are the exact opposite of what it is you would ask them to do.
That I completely agree with you that, like, the nicest way I'll put it is that it is a very awkwardly worded sentence, because I think if you ask Dan knows, like, that's the reason the Angels have been an abject disaster, despite having maybe 2 of the 10 greatest players who ever lived on their team, over the last decade plus, really, is not because they weren't willing to spend money. It's because they were too willing to spend money on name value and on veterans. They signed Albert Pujols, basically the exact moment that Mike Trout emerged on the scene. And that turned out to be one of the worst contracts, I would say, in baseball history. I mean, they gave him one of the biggest contracts ever, and he was a good player for the Angels for like 2 years. And then we said the Anthony Rendon contract, at least Pujols was playable. Like Rendon has been unplayable, or just like literally he cannot play, injured, unplayable, as well as so bad we don't want him to play unplayable for his contract. So his point, I think the point he's trying to make is basically say that, like, just because, if you have a young superstar, you should think of yourself as, because you have that player, your path to the playoffs, you always have a chance of making the playoffs. Like, you don't have to rebuild. You are competitive almost immediately if you're smart. The Angels' problem wasn't that they didn't spend, it's that they spent stupidly. They weren't smart. They didn't develop players. Their farm system was weak. They lucked into getting Shohei Ohtani, not just a superstar, but a superstar for peanuts for basically his entire 6-year run. So the problem wasn't that, they didn't try to spend. The problem was they bought the wrong players. It's a weird statement that he made. I agree with the sentiment. Yes, the Royals, because they have Bobby Witt proved himself to be so good last year that we no longer have to think about the Royals as needing to rebuild for the next 6 years until he's a free agent.
What I find amazing is in just the third year of Bobby Witt, they're already in the playoffs, and he's somehow writing them off like he is the broken down end of his run, still with $100+ million worth of salary around him. Mike Trout, after years of ineptitude, it is just trying to continue this theme that somehow the Royals don't try and other teams do. And it's terrible.
He did say peak Mike Trout. Like, I don't think he's talking about the Mike Trout that we've seen the last 5 years. He's basically saying the problem isn't that the Angels haven't made the playoffs the last 2 or 3 years. It's that from 2015 to 2019, like, they made the playoffs in 2014. They had the best record in the American League. They got swept by the Royals. But coming out of that year, if you had said the next 5 years, the Angels are not going to make the playoffs, you would have assumed, well, Mike Trout must have had a catastrophic injury. No, from 2015 to 2019, he was peak Mike Trout. I think 2019 was when he started to miss games, but he was still incredible when he played. And yet they never made the playoffs during that run. Yeah. So I think that's sort of his point. I don't think he's comparing Bobby Witt to Mike Trout today. He's comparing Bobby Witt to Mike Trout in 2013, right? When he's already established himself and he's still young enough, you assume that peak is going to last for a while. I get his point, but I just think that the Angels are a very strange team to bring up when your point is the Royals need to spend money. Because it's just the last team that I would look at as an example of how to spend your money. They've done a terrible job.
Okay, what else would you add on the subject of this piece?
So the 2 points that he made that I thought were really interesting, and why I think I sent this to you. The first was he had written an article earlier this week, completely unrelated, about Alex Bregman, who is one of the last premier free agents who hasn't signed yet. And he ran a simple, what I like about this, it's simple statistical projection for each team. It's completely objective. It's not his opinions. It's just the math talking. What team, if you took out their current third baseman, put Alex Bregman on their team, or, if they have a good third baseman, move that third baseman somewhere else. Like he'll put Alex Bregman on every single team and reran their models to say, how likely are they to make the playoffs with Bregman versus without? In that piece, he didn't really mention it all in that piece, because the piece was more about likely destinations, and the Royals are not a likely destination for Alex Bregman for multiple reasons. But in that article, at the top of the list was the Kansas City Royals, that their playoff odds improved by 15% if they added Alex Bregman, more than any other team in baseball. I remember seeing this at the time and being like, that's really interesting. I mean, yes, Maikel Garcia wasn't very good last year, and if they get a lot more production from third base, that would be a huge upgrade. But I wouldn't have expected them to be the number one team in baseball. But then I looked at it, and this is the point he's making. The reason why the Royals are number one on that list is they're basically close to number one for almost any free agent they might sign right now. So any free agent out there right now would help the Royals more than other teams. because of where the Royals project to be. FanGraphs has them at 81 and 81 for the upcoming year, which might not sound great, but frankly, I'm happy with that projection because we know the Royals, historically, especially with the Baseball Prospectus one, which I'll get to, have never been projected well, even in those rare years where they were.
What were they projected last year?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Because I'd like to point out how many guys grossly exceeded their expectations. Grossly exceeded. I mean, like Bobby Witt Jr. won. He did. But the expectations were still pretty damn high on Bobby Witt Jr., right? Seth Lugo, I'm sure did.
Lugo, I'm sure did. Reagan's probably in terms of the innings.
Quantity of innings, right, I think, is going to really do that. But I'm just curious, like, how much they play with the numbers. Because, Michael Massey didn't exceed. Michael Garcia didn't exceed. Vinny Pasquantino didn't exceed. Salvador Perez probably didn't decline as much as they. I mean, you could point out a few things. And then the big thing, of course, is that the Royals scored a lot more runs than expected because they hit so well with runners in scoring position, which is not something you can predict. May or may not occur this year. So, but like Baseball Prospectus, as you know, I mean, it's notorious how much the Royals have done poorly in that. They're projected to win 81.3 games. Like they have a 502 simulated winning percentage. I'm not sure. Maybe in 2015, maybe. I'm not even sure 2015 they were projected to have a winning record. Like that's actually a really impressive projection for a team that, yes, they won 86 last year, but they won 56 the year before. And when you're projecting a team's upcoming record, the best way to do that, if all you know is how many games they won the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, like you basically take 3 parts the year before, 2 parts the year before that, and 1 part 3 years before. That's the best method to use. So like the fact that they won 56 games 2 years ago does still matter. And yet they're projected to only fall back 4 or 5 wins. They have them in second place ahead of the Guardians and the Tigers. They're only like 5 games behind the Twins. So the point being is the Twins, by the way, were the mathematical pick last year as well and fell short.
Look, if models were perfect, they'd be soothsayers or not. They're just
I agree.
projections, right? But this is what I'm saying. I'm framing this in a positive manner. The Royals are good enough that they're almost playoff caliber. And so if they can improve the team by 2 or 3 wins, a 2-win or 3-win free agent, as we call them, right now, in general will help the Royals more than almost any other team.
Okay, so a couple of things on that. One, we're starting with the premise that they are the team that would benefit the most because this guy says they are. We're starting with the premise that they're almost a playoff team, and they're not a playoff team right now because this model says they are. And then we're making that an absolute and saying, here's why you have to spend more on Anthony Santander because nobody benefits more than you. Now, I would ask you, do you think at this time that there is any baseball team, or save 1 or 2, that doesn't have a better analytics department than what is in the FanGraphs and the Baseball Prospectus? Like there was a time that all those things were probably better than the analytic departments of the baseball teams. But do you think that there is any team that does not have better data at this point than what the, media analytics departments have?
Better data? No. Better analysts? Maybe a handful. If you factor in that some teams just don't listen to their analytics department, there are still a half dozen teams that are, behind the curve on this.
But largely,
the majority of teams, and I think the Royals are among the majority of teams, certainly in this regard, have better data and better use of that data than what you and I can do.
And I want to be clear. They don't walk on water. They don't, I've said this from the time I got into this industry. They're just human beings, even though they're baseball people. But my point is just there's been a massive investment across the entire industry at trying to get these things right. I like the piece and I like the idea, but I also think that's their model, right, that has it there. And if the Royals model has them being in the playoffs right now, then why would you go and overextend and grossly you'll put yourself in a bad position in the future if you feel like you're already in the playoffs right now?
Well, but the reason is because if a model says, if your model just says yes or no, then you need to fire everybody who made that model.
Right.
Every model is probabilistic, right? Like the model says 95%.
I'm just going with the verbiage that you've used previous to this. Okay?
But the point being is that it's all kind of probability, right? Like they might be a lot more right now. I just looked it up. The FanGraphs has the Royals at like 39% to make the playoffs. That is honestly a higher percentage probability than I would have expected based on the team. The Baseball Prospectus has them at 32%. 1-3. Those are not bad odds. Maybe the Royals have themselves at 60 or 70%. Right? Maybe
I had them higher than that, just as an eye test, not putting a bunch of math, but I think the Royals are more competitive than that.
But even if you have them at 60 or 70%, I mean, if you can add a player that is going to increase that to 80 or 85%, what you're basically doing is reducing your odds of missing the playoffs.
Do you think Anthony Santander really moves the needle 17%? Do you buy that?
For a team on the bubble, this is what we've learned about like what we call the success curves and the marginal value of an extra win. If you say let's say a 3-win player, a player that's going to increase your win total by 3 wins, which in 2025, if you believe that Anthony Santander can translate to Kauffman Stadium, and I had some reservations about that personally, which is why I want to stay clear. But like the Royals made an offer, so clearly they thought some of that power would translate. If they thought he was a 3-win player, yes, a 3-win player I think can increase your playoff odds by 17% if you're in the Royals position. I absolutely believe that. I mean, essentially everything we're talking about Santander was my argument for signing Jurickson Profar. So same idea.
Yeah.
Which so
I can't help you with it for a second, as we know. But look, I get it. I do understand that one player could be a difference, but I also understand that there is a limit that you go. I heard, you know where I heard this exact same thing. That's a little bit different because I'm going to give you a salary cap sport analogy. But as we know, there may not be a cap for the league, but there's a cap that each team has, right? There is a limit to what every owner will spend. But it was when the Chiefs did not get Trent Williams signed, right? And it was like, you got to have a left tackle. That was the problem. The Bucs killed your quarterback. What the hell are you doing? You got to get this guy. And they didn't do it. And they pivoted, and they still spent.
But they pivoted. That's the point. They pivoted. Imagine if the Chiefs just brought back, I'm trying to think of a comparable example because, Eric Fisher basically retired. But like, if the Chiefs go into next year with Kingsley Suamataia and Wanya Morris at left tackle, and those are the only 2 options, I think we would all be like, this is weird. And that's sort of what the Royals have done with right field. I think that's
Jonathan India, I would disagree because if Jonathan India plays left field and then you platoon Renfroe and Melendez, they have certainly addressed it. I mean, it's a big difference in what you would expect productivity wise. If you take away the bad half of each of the other 2 players, and then you translate Jonathan India to being what he was offensively last year, while presumably not playing any worse than what you got from MJ Melendez in left field, you have improved the position. You have pivoted and improved. The fact that you got India before you ended up being outpriced on Santander does not eliminate or diminish that you got Jonathan India.
Well, this gets into the one other point in his article, which I thought was really compelling because I kind of knew it, but didn't really know until he put the data out there, and the data is irrefutable, which is the Royals had below replacement level offense, not at 1, not at 2, but 3 positions, left field, right field. And then we don't talk enough, I think, about the fact that the Royals had almost no production from DH last year. And the point he made was that since they have the data for like position by position replacement value going back to, I think, 2002. So in the last 22 years, not counting the pandemic year, 222 teams made the playoffs. 90 of them had below replacement level at 1 position. 28 of them, I think, had it at 2 positions. The Royals, the 2024 Royals, are the only team in baseball to make the playoffs despite having 3 positions that were below replacement level. And that's that, again, we know their corner outfield sucks. And yes, they could, by getting India, they can move all of their left field options over to right field. Melendez and Renfroe can play there. They still haven't done anything about DH. This is one of the reasons why one of the top guys on my free agent wish list was Jock Peterson, who I don't think can play the outfield, period. But maybe he's only a platoon DH. But because Salvador Perez needs that position some of the time when he's not catching, I feel like it's kind of hamstrung the Royals into you not addressing the fact that the other 110, 120 games, they don't really have a full-time DH. And that's why, to me, a left-handed hitting, a left-handed hitter who can just platoon at DH would be a perfect complement to this team. by not getting it. Now we're kind of going into the season with, wishing upon a star in both right field and DH. That's my concern. That's why I hope that they still can make a move for one back, because they really do need two.
Among the 222 playoff teams, 90 of them had a single position below replacement level in WAR. Designated hitter was a position that playoff teams most often received less than replacement level production. So why are we panicking when that is the spot?
Because they also have the other two spots.
Well, agreed, but they've addressed theoretically one with Jonathan India.
Right. I just like them to. I'm not saying they have to address all three. You can fix one.
And by if you take away the bad half of the other two, they've addressed another in right field by platooning Melendez and Renfroe. Now, listen, I don't think the Royals are looking at the new swing of MJ Melendez and going, all right, here he is, our new 40 and 120 guy. Like, I don't think they're looking at it. I think they're probably quite pleased that he's making an effort and trying. And because I know for a fact that they have seen everything that we have seen and talked about with his swing. But I get it. But I do think, like, this is the answer for the Kansas City Royals is never going to be that they signed Alex Bregman, signed Anthony Santander, and signed, who was the other, and Juan Soto. We have 3 holes. We just filled them with the 3 best guys on the market. That will never be the answer in Kansas City. So to me, I think, acknowledging the economic disparity that is baseball today, and then saying, okay, these are the spots. How did they address them? Because there is no mention of, well, if India can't play. He does mention India in left field. That's kind of like, yeah, by the way, they think this could happen. Right? But if India works and is bad, and I told you my big concern is that you send him out to left field or even over to third base, and then that gets in his head and he doesn't hit. That's my fear. It's why I kind of liked him at second base. The more I talk to people, the more it's going to be Massey at second, and he's moving either to third or to left field. That's what I think is coming. So if India can be offensively the leadoff hitter and play left field, that solves one of those spots or improves one of those spots. And if you strip the bad half away from the other two in right field and put the good halves together in right field, that does improve that. And at one point in the piece, he says, if you can just get one win from each one of these 3 spots, well, Jonathan India will be more than a 1-win improvement if he can play left field as well or better. And it's not going to take much to play it better. But offensively, he will be more than a 1-win improvement. Same thing would happen in right field. Right. And so now you're just looking for the DH spot. And as we know, there is a trade deadline in baseball, so you can still add something. I don't think credit is being like, I think something should be said. Here's how the Royals are trying to do it. We'll see if it works. And let's see what does platoon MJ Melendez and Hunter Renfroe look like compared to Anthony Santander this year?
I mean, the problem, the argument against that is we kind of saw what they didn't platoon with each other, but we kind of saw what Hunter Renfroe and MJ Melendez did last year, and that's why those numbers were as bad as they were.
To a degree, we did. Now we're going to see it full force. We hope. We're going to see it full force. Right. We, as we said before, are always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, are we ready to pivot to the free agents that might be left? Or do you have even more on the
No, I think we covered it. Those are the main points. So yes, like, is there an option out there that, specifically on this subject, are there any free agents left that the Royals could still, sign and make this argument moot? Do you
is Alex Bregman a legit option in your mind?
I've not heard the slightest hint of a whisper he might be coming.
I've heard there is no interest as I understand.
I mean, it would be a creative move, but like I don't see the fit.
6 for 160 is said to not be enough from the Astros.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's the latest thing. So you've got to go either more years or more per year Would you suggest that the Royals should spend that on a player for his age 31 to 36 seasons?
No. The only way you sign him is if some sort of quote unquote pillow contract. And the fact that we know he has these frankly, I don't know what he thinks he's going to get. If he's got 6 and 160, he should take it. That's just that's my opinion. My professional advice as a non-professional. But Royals should not and will not be spending that kind of money.
Because what was it part of the deal that they thought he would lose 30 home runs playing, in average ballparks outside of Houston, he'd lose 30 home runs on his career totals.
I mean, certainly in Kansas City, I think you would. Yes.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I think we can all agree on that one. So, okay. All right. So not Bregman. You got any other names?
I mean, so again, focusing on the outfield, right? I mean, the rest of the team is fairly settled. I'm not, I don't want to pivot from us talking about the fact that they haven't filled an outfield hole and then say they should sign a new second baseman. I think we've covered that. So somebody can play outfield or DH. There aren't a lot of players left, right? I mean, and frankly, every day Randall Grichuk just signed. He was the guy, I wanted instead of Hunter Renfroe last year, and he had a good year, and he but he's a right-handed hitting outfielder. I don't see how you have him and Renfroe on the team. Like, to me, one of the things that makes it easy to screen players is do they bat left-handed around? Because I just feel like between Joey Wiemer, Dairon Blanco, Hunter Renfroe, like you have enough right-handed hitting options. I don't think that's gonna. And at DH again, Salvador Perez. You have Freddie Fermin catching and Salvador Perez at DH some of the time. So the Royals need is somebody who can bat left-handed, either a left-hander or a switch hitter. There are very few options left. There is one guy who I like still that could actually work for this team, and that's Alex Verdugo.
Yeah, he's
not a great player, but he's not a bad player. I mean, we saw him in the LDS against the Yankees, and he was annoying, even though his numbers weren't great. But like, he showed something that was a series where we saw the value of plate discipline against a team that doesn't have a lot of plate discipline. And he was one of those guys who's taking a lot of pitches, making the Royals pitchers work. He's not an incredibly patient hitter, but he's not bad. He's never struck out 100 times in a season. And yet he's got double-digit power the last 5 years, not counting the pandemic year. Like,
barely. I mean, double-digit is...
Right. Between 11 and 13 home runs in the last 5 full seasons. Fairly consistent. Not a great player. And he did fall back last year, but he's only 29. His defensive numbers remain good, both in like left field and right field. I kind of see him as almost like a poor man's Andrew Benintendi, but the Andrew Benintendi the Royals traded for, who was actually really, really good. Like, he's not that good, but it's the same kind of player. Left-handed, spray hitter, good in the outfield. And could you get him for one year deal, $5 or $6 million? At this point, if the price drops,
that's kind of the going rate for all these guys that we've talked about that are landing. They're all landing for 1 for $5.
Right. That's where we're into that part of the offseason right now. So I just feel like put him on this team, and you're not paying him to be a 162 game a year guy. Play him as a platoon guy. He's going to help your defense. He can play left field potentially, or you can put him in right field and have Melendez and Renfroe, DH. It opens up a lot of options. He's a high average guy and a decent OBP guy. I mean, his career on base is 328, which is a lot better than what the Royals had last year. So, if you're no longer, you don't have the options for a star player anymore. This is the best that's out there, but I think he still passes the threshold to me of somebody who would help the team in 2025.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I've kind of liked the idea of him for a couple of years, going back to when the Dodgers were walking away, when you thought, okay, hey, there might be some, real pop in this guy's bat. I don't think that's going to be there. I think the question would become, I'd have to talk to like the Royals scouts. Is it a swing that gets old fast? Like MJ Melendez is going to get old real quick unless this new swing fixes some things, right? The more Eric Hosmer, there's a lot going on with that swing. Got old real fast. Billy Butler, the toe tap, got old real fast. Is that what we saw last year, that at 28, he's already starting to slow down and he doesn't have the answer on how to fix it? Then I would stay away from it. But I'm with you. I think he is a worthwhile. Can we get him in? Can we work with our hit guys? It's one of the reasons why I hate to say it, but until I see the Royals absolutely guru and turn somebody's hitting completely around at the big league level, were Kevin Seitzer here, I would be like, let's let Kevin Seitzer have a shot at seeing if he can get more from out.
100%.
But even without Kevin Seitzer as an organization, you have to believe in your hitting people. So let's give our guys a chance to work with them. Let's try a 1 year, $5 million deal and get it done. And if you're like, I think when you're really good is when your guys can go, if he does this, he will be great. And then you get a 2 or 3 year deal. A lot of times the player doesn't want to do it because they think that they're better, but you get them, you show them that they're better, show them how to be better. And then, you've already got them locked for that second or third year. I'm with you. I think that's about it for the hitters.
Right. And I think, look, and the Royals can afford it. Like, to their credit, having signed Estevez, their current 26-man opening day payroll projects at around $120 million, which is higher than last year. It was $115 million. Mind you, last year they were coming off a 100-loss season, and now they're a legit contender, and they're selling season tickets to people with the promise of them making the playoffs again. Like, a $5 million jump is not huge. It's higher, but it's still lower than it was in 2017. Not adjusting for inflation. Like, 8 years ago, the Royals' 26-man opening day payroll was $143 million. They're at 120 right now. So a 1 year, $5 million, even $7-8 million, they could afford one more contract in that range.
Yeah.
And still be, comfortably, below where they were 8 years ago, a little bit more than last year. And yes, I know there's obviously issues with the TV deals, and a lot of teams are dealing with that. And I'm sensitive to that. But again, they'd be 10 or 15% lower than they were 8 years ago. Adjusting for inflation, that's like a 30 to 35% drop. So yeah, I think, that money, I hope, should not be. They don't think that Alex Verdugo helps the team. Fine. But if the money's an issue, that's a problem.
I would mention Paul DeJong as a fallback.
The only concern I have with him is that he's a right-handed hitter. And I just, how that fits with the team. But would he be, a good fit as a utility guy? Absolutely. I mean, this is, he was good as a Royal. It was a small sample size. He feels old, but he's only 30 or 31 now.
Well, I think at some point, Michael Garcia has to be judged as what he is. And so, like, we're like, let's go with him. Like, where are you? That to me is like, why are they if he does not end up being any better than he is right now, then they missed an opportunity to move him. I'm going to state it again. Like, somewhere along the way, when they decided Bobby Witt Jr. was our guy, they should have moved him. This is going to be another situation. If all he ends up being, if Michael Garcia just ends up being a utility guy, then he should have been moved when people had the idea that he still could be an everyday shortstop. And so if you moved him and put Paul DeJong in for a couple $1 million, you're just as good or better. And presumably you've gotten something for Michael Garcia.
It's an interesting idea. I mean, I like the idea of Paul DeJong as a starter almost more than as a utility guy, just because, he's an all or nothing kind of hitter, and you need a lot of bats to get the 25 home runs that can paper over the low OBP. Would he be better than Michael Garcia? I don't know, but like, if you could,
but would he be worse?
Probably not than last year.
I want to be clear. It only works if you're getting something for it.
That's what I'm just about to say. Like, if Garcia still has value, then yes, I'm much more on board with that idea than I was a year ago. But just for the same reason you and I were so disappointed with how he played last year, I just worry that other teams can look at a stat line too, and I worry his trade value has gone to crap. And in which case, if he's not, I don't want to sell low on him either and just give him away. But it is an interesting idea. I mean, look, even if they don't make a move, Jonathan India, like, there's a chance he ends up at third base. Like Michael Garcia, they're talking about trying him out in the outfield, which is not usually a good sign for a guy whose calling card is his infield defense, that he's being asked to play outfield. But it does mean that, like, this is kind of a make or break year for him. He needs to perform. He needs to produce at the plate, or his days as a starter are going to be behind him pretty soon.
All right. Anyone else? Anyone on the pitching side?
I feel like the pitching staff, they're pretty solid now. I mean, having signed Estevez, one more reliever was the mantra. They got that guy. They had already re-signed Lorenzen, who can go back and forth. And now it's like, I worry if they sign any more players, they're not going to have room for Bubic and Marsh unless they. I mean, certainly Bubic, March, and Daniel Lynch. Like, all these guys should be on the major league roster at this point. Like, if Daniel Lynch has to go back down to AAA again, then it might be time to move on. I'm hopeful that his move to the bullpen has changed his career, but like, I don't see a spot for another pitcher. So I'm comfortable with what they put together on that side.
I would kick the tires on Hector Neris, David Robertson on an incentive-laden deal just because he's 39 years old. But, I mean, I would love to see David Robertson added to this bullpen and then just force guys to go down and perform well in the minor leagues to be ready to come up when somebody does go down. I mean, but I'm thinking, 1 with 5 plus 5 in incentives for David Robertson. If you had the money to spend, and you feel like it's still there for Robertson, I don't know what he did in September. Like, was he trailing off the eye?
Right.
The numbers overall for the year look like he's still a guy who can be a swing and miss guy. But I would be interested in that. But my assumption is somebody's going to give kind of going to give a bigger deal than that before.
Right. All these guys, if you can get them as NRIs, like, absolutely, right? Non-roster invitees, take all of them. I mean, you never know when you'll find a Ryan Madsen or Chris Medlin out of that group. But yeah, I just feel like, this is a guy who's coming up. I think that.
Okay. Rany, we have gone as long as we can go. We will save our players we discussed to talk about the free agents. Did the Royals miss out on any guys for next week? This week, I will remind you, we're brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best one contractor, all things parking lot. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. For the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here